Welcome back to the Peak Performance Table Tennis Podcast. Today's episode is our beefiest yet. We'll be diving into the concept of becoming bulletproof for table tennis, with topics ranging from injury prevention, warming up, effective recovery strategies, practical advice for supporting your immune system, and more. If you haven't already, make sure you subscribe so you don't miss future episodes, and please leave a rating and review. It really helps. And now, on to today's episode. Enjoy.
Hey everyone, I'm really excited to dive into a topic that I feel like a lot of us kind of brush over sometimes.
Oh, really? What's that?
It's becoming bulletproof on the table tennis court.
Okay, so not literally bulletproof.
Yeah, not literally. I've just been really digging into this book, Peak Performance Table Tennis by Kevin Finn, and it's got me thinking about injury prevention in a whole new way. What if instead of just bouncing back from stress, we could actually get stronger from it?
It's interesting, right? That's actually a concept called Anti-Fragility that Finn talks about in the book.
Yeah.
And, we tend to think of stress as like this thing to be avoided at all costs. But the reality is that a certain amount of stress, it's actually essential for growth and adaptation, right?
And I used to be all about, rest. That was the key to recovery. But it seems like it's more nuanced than that.
Yeah.
It's about finding that sweet spot between pushing your limits, but also giving your body the downtime it needs.
Absolutely. And that's where this whole idea of allostatic load comes in, right? Imagine like a stress bucket. So every deadline you've got, every tough practice, just the normal wear and tear of everyday life, it all adds to this bucket, right?
Okay.
And if we're not careful, if we're not really strategic about how we manage that stress, that bucket's going to overflow. And that's when we get injured. That's when we start to feel burnt out, or both, really.
Oh, the bucket analogy is so real, though. It's like, you're juggling work, family, practice, and then you try to squeeze in one more thing, and your body's like, nope, not today.
Exactly. And Finn, he gives this great example in the book about football players.
Yeah.
And it turns out they're actually more prone to injuries during exam periods.
What?
It just goes to show you that stress is stress, right? Our bodies don't necessarily differentiate between physical stress and mental or emotional stress. It all kind of gets lumped together.
That's so interesting. So I guess what I'm hearing is that even if we're not professional athletes, even if we're just playing table tennis recreationally, we still need to be mindful of that stress bucket.
Yeah. I mean, you think about those repetitive motions, the hours spent perfecting your serve, it all takes a toll, And then as you get better, as your training volume increases, you're essentially adding more stress to that bucket. So yeah, you got to be mindful of that.
The book actually recommends a 10% increase in training volume per week as a general guideline.
Okay, so if I'm doing 10 hours of table tennis one week, next week I'm aiming for 11 hours max, not 20, because I'm feeling ambitious.
Exactly. Slow and steady wins the race. What about after a break, though? Let's say you take a week off from training. Totally off. Do you really need to ease back in that gradually?
Oh, that's a good question. I never know what to do after a break.
The book is pretty clear about this. It's like a reverse taper.
Yeah.
Ideally, you would spend just as much time gradually ramping your intensity back up as you did off.
Gotcha.
So 2 weeks off, 2 weeks ramping back up.
That makes a lot of sense. I would be so bummed if I came back from a relaxing vacation.
Right.
Only to immediately sideline myself because I was too eager to get back on the court.
Exactly. And this all ties into a concept that I think is often misunderstood, the difference between overreaching versus overtraining. How do we walk that line between pushing our limits and overdoing it? Finn talks about this fitness fatigue model. And I remember seeing a graph in the book, but I'm a little fuzzy on the details.
Yeah. So the fitness fatigue model, that's a good one. The graph is super helpful because it really shows you visually the relationship between fitness, fatigue, and ultimately your performance, right? So as your fitness improves, and we're talking actual physiological adaptations here, right?
Right.
Your fatigue also increases.
Okay.
So it's like they go hand in hand, right? But when that fatigue starts to outpace the fitness gains, that's when you hit a plateau.
Gotcha.
Or even worse, you increase the risk of injury.
So it's like a balancing act, right?
Yeah.
You want to push yourself, you want to get stronger. But if you go too hard for too long, you might actually start going backwards because of that fatigue.
Exactly. And that's where the difference between functional overreaching and non-functional overreaching comes in.
Okay, so break that down for me.
So functional overreaching, it's like you're intentionally pushing yourself to the limit for a short period, right?
Right.
Like maybe you have a week of really intense training, but then it's followed by adequate rest and recovery.
So it's strategic, it's planned.
Exactly. You're using that overreaching period to adapt and improve.
Mm-hmm.
But the non-functional overreaching, that's when you're ignoring those early warning signs.
Like what kinds of warning signs?
Oh, that lingering fatigue, if your performance starts to drop, or even, are you more irritable?
Okay, yeah.
It's like your body's trying to tell you something.
Right.
You're pushing harder, but you're not recovering, so you just kind of keep digging yourself into a hole.
And if you stay in that hole for too long, that's when you risk overtraining syndrome, right?
Right, exactly. True overtraining syndrome, OTS, that's pretty rare, thankfully.
Okay.
But it's a good reminder that we got to be attuned to our bodies. We can't just be pushing all the time.
No, definitely not. So we're not just talking about physical recovery here.
No.
It's mental, it's emotional.
It's all connected. It all plays a part.
Everything. Yeah, that makes sense.
Ready to take your table tennis game to the next level? Download the Peak Performance Table Tennis Routine, a free table tennis-specific workout program designed to help you move faster, hit harder, and last longer in your toughest matches. It's the most up-to-date training guide I've developed, and it's completely free because I don't want finances to stand in the way of your progress. This routine is simple, effective, and perfect for all skill levels. Grab your free copy today at peakperformancetabletennis.com/routine.
So I guess on that note, let's maybe switch gears a little bit and talk about something that I think sometimes we do on auto, and that's warming up.
Yeah, it's so important.
I have to admit, when it comes to warming up, I'm kind of guilty of just like doing a few static stretches before I hit the court. Is that enough? Or do I need to seriously rethink my little pre-table tennis routine?
You're not alone. A lot of people think, static stretching, that's the be-all and end-all of warming up. But Finn, he highlights some really interesting research that challenges that,
Okay.
It turns out static stretching alone might not be as effective at preventing injuries as we once thought.
Wait, really? So all those years of touching my toes were basically for nothing?
Well, not nothing. It still has its place. But for warming up for something as dynamic as table tennis, we need to think beyond just stretching those muscles, you know what I mean?
Yeah. Okay, that makes sense. So what does a good warm-up for table tennis actually look like then?
It's all about, like you said, getting those muscles warm. We're talking literally raising your core body temperature, getting your muscles and joints ready for those quick, explosive movements that you do in table tennis.
Like jumping jacks, that kind of thing.
Exactly. Light cardio, dynamic stretches, where you're moving through a range of motion.
Okay.
Finn even suggests incorporating some light agility work, quick footwork patterns, things that really mimic the movements you'll be doing on the court.
So even though table tennis doesn't look as physically demanding as like basketball or something, a proper warm-up is still super important.
Oh, absolutely. Finn mentions a study that showed that a good warm-up can actually lead to faster ball speed and improved agility in table tennis players.
Wow. Okay. I'm convinced I'm definitely going to up my warm-up game. But let's talk about building that bulletproof body. I know strength training is important, but I'll be honest, sometimes those weights are just not as appealing as hitting the table tennis court,
I get it. We'd rather be playing. But think of it this way. Strength training, it's like building your body armor, right? It's about strengthening your bones, your tendons, your ligaments, and that's going to help you generate more power. And ultimately, it's going to reduce your risk of injury.
It's like giving our bodies that extra layer of protection. Okay, I like it.
Good. So, compound exercises are great.
Like squats and stuff.
Squats, lunges, push-ups, rows, all those things. Those are fantastic because they work multiple muscle groups at once.
So compound exercises, check. What about the smaller stabilizing muscles, though? Those seem important for things like wrist control and, preventing those pesky, tennis elbow or, whatever the table tennis equivalent is.
Yeah, you're spot on. And Finn, he actually emphasizes that, we don't want to neglect those smaller muscle groups. So incorporating exercises, wrist curls, reverse wrist curls, forearm exercises.
Right.
Those are going to help build strength and stability in those areas that are really prone to overuse injuries in table tennis.
That makes sense. So we're working, all the muscle groups, big and small.
All of them.
To build that bulletproof body.
Exactly.
Awesome. But I'm curious, there are those times when we do feel those twinges, those aches, How do we know when to push through and when to back off?
It's a good question. Learning to differentiate between good pain and bad pain.
Yeah, because sometimes you feel that burn, and you're like, oh, this is good.
Yeah.
But then other times it's like, oh no.
Right. It's like that burning sensation in your muscles when you're working hard. That's usually okay. That's fine.
Mm-hmm.
But if you feel sharp, sudden pain in your joints or tendons, that's your body saying, hey, time out.
All right, listen to your body.
Absolutely.
Speaking of recovery, though,
Yes.
I'm very eager to hear, what secrets Finn has up his sleeve. Hit me.
Okay, so before we get to the secrets, he really emphasizes nailing the fundamentals. We're talking, sleep 8 hours minimum, folks.
Yeah, I need more of that.
Don't we all? Proper nutrition, fueling your body with nutrient-dense foods, especially those recovery-boosting carbs.
Yes.
And then, of course, managing stress levels.
It all goes back to the bucket.
It all goes back to the bucket.
Yeah.
You can't out-train a bad diet or chronic sleep deprivation.
So true. I've tried. It doesn't work.
We've all been there.
Yeah.
But Finn makes a really interesting point that I think sometimes gets overlooked. He says that often the best recovery method is actually removing hindering factors rather than just adding new things.
What do you mean by that?
So let's say you're constantly adding recovery methods. Ice baths, fancy supplements, compression boots, the whole 9 yards. But you're also training 6 days a week. You're only getting 5 hours of sleep a night. You're feeling super stressed out.
Yeah.
Right? You're probably going to get better results by maybe scaling back that training volume a little bit, prioritizing your sleep,
Okay.
finding ways to manage that stress rather than just, adding on top of everything else. It's about addressing the root cause, right?
Yeah. It's not just about putting a Band-Aid over,
Exactly.
the real problem. It's getting to the bottom of it.
But, once we've got those foundational elements in check, I'm all ears for those extra recovery strategies.
Okay. So beyond the basics, massage, compression garments, those tight-fitting sleeves or socks worn for a day or so after intense training.
Okay.
Those can be beneficial. There's actually even some research that they might improve your strength in your next workout.
Really? Because I've seen a lot of athletes wearing those.
Mhm.
I always wonder if it's like a placebo effect or if it really works.
Yeah, the research is still evolving, but there's
Okay.
definitely some promising evidence there.
Interesting.
Another one. Low-intensity cycling after, say, you do a leg workout can help flesh out those waste products that build up in your muscles.
Or like an active recovery kind of thing.
Exactly. I like that. It sounds much more appealing than just lying on the couch, which is sometimes necessary.
Of course. Right. And here's one that might surprise you. Tart cherry juice.
Wait, the stuff you put in pies?
The very same. It actually contains compounds that can help reduce inflammation and oxidative stress,
Really?
which can be helpful for muscle recovery.
Okay, I'm adding that to my shopping list.
There you go.
You learn something new every deep dive. All right, so we've covered a lot of ground here. Stress management, warm-ups, strength training, recovery. But what about when, despite our best efforts, we still get injured? What does Finn have to say about navigating that recovery process?
He's very clear that it's not a one-size-fits-all, right? It's always best to consult with a medical professional.
Of course, yeah.
But in general, he stresses the importance of maintaining or even slightly increasing calorie intake during injury recovery.
Really? I would have thought, you'd want to cut back because you're not as active.
Right, it's counterintuitive. But your body is working hard to repair those tissues, and that requires energy.
That's true.
And cutting calories too drastically can actually hinder the healing process.
Makes sense. You've got to fuel that healing.
Yeah.
So what about macros? Should we be loading up on protein?
You got it. Protein is crucial for tissue repair, so yeah, making sure you're getting enough protein is key.
Okay.
And just like with overall recovery, eating a nutrient-dense diet, lots of fruits, vegetables, whole foods, that's going to support your overall health and give your body the building blocks it needs to heal.
So basically, don't use an injury as an excuse to just live off of pizza and ice cream, although that does sound tempting sometimes.
Everything in moderation, right?
Moderation, yes.
Yeah.
We can have our treats, but we don't want to, sabotage all our hard work.
Exactly.
But speaking of not sabotaging our hard work, Finn talks about training around injuries.
So there's this cool thing called the crossover effect. Basically, if you injure one side of your body, continuing to train the other side can actually help maintain strength and muscle mass in the injured limb.
No way. How does that even work?
It's not fully understood, but it seems like there's some neurological and hormonal communication going on. So if you've injured your right arm, for example, doing some strength training with your left arm
Okay.
might actually help minimize the amount of strength you lose in that injured arm.
That's wild. I had no idea. So even when we're sidelined, there are still things we can do
Yes.
to stay active and support that whole healing process. But what about preventing those like sniffles that can totally derail our training? Because I feel like getting sick right before a big tournament has got to be one of the most frustrating things.
The absolute worst.
So does Finn address that?
He does. He actually dedicates a whole section in the book to illness prevention, especially for athletes. And, he starts by saying that exercise, while it's generally good for our immune system,
Right.
it can actually temporarily suppress the immune system, especially during those periods of intense training.
So our bodies are working so hard to recover from the training that they're like, hold on, immune system, we need to focus here.
Exactly. And, for athletes who are traveling, competing, constantly exposed to new people,
Right.
that can be kind of a recipe for disaster.
Yeah, for sure.
So in addition to, the sleep, the nutrition, stress management, he suggests a few additional strategies. Garlic is a big one.
Okay.
Studies show that consuming garlic regularly can actually help ward off colds and infections.
So no vampire worries.
Exactly.
I like it. What else?
Vitamin D, zinc, also super important for immune function.
Okay.
A lot of us are deficient in one or both of those, so supplementation can be really helpful, especially during the winter months when we're not getting as much sunlight.
Right. Makes sense. What about vitamin C? Because, my grandma always swore by that
Yes.
for preventing colds.
Interestingly, the research on vitamin C is a little mixed.
Oh, really?
It seems like it's most effective for athletes who are regularly engaging in intense exercise. In those cases, yeah, it might help reduce the risk of catching a cold.
Okay.
But for less active folks, it might not make as much of a difference.
Interesting. So maybe it's more for like targeted immune support for us active folks.
Exactly.
Okay. Anything else on this immunity front?
While Finn gets a little playful with what he calls the cure, and again, he's very clear, this is not medical advice.
Of course.
But it's basically his personal protocol that he's found helpful for combating a cold.
Oh, okay. All right. I'm intrigued. So what's in this cure?
Well, it involves things like, drinking plenty of fluids,
Right.
zinc lozenges, a supplement called African geranium.
African geranium. Okay. I never even heard of that.
It's supposed to have some antiviral and antibacterial properties, but the real star of the show is his witch's brew.
Okay. You have to elaborate on this witch's brew.
So imagine this, a steaming mug of homemade bone broth,
Okay.
seasoned with lemon, garlic, onions, carrots.
That actually sounds kind of delicious.
Right.
It's like a savory immune boosting soup. I could get on board with that.
Right. And it's not just some old wives' tale. Bone broth is rich in nutrients that can help reduce inflammation.
Okay, there's something to it. I like it. So for our listeners out there who are ready to, really take their game to the next level, what's the one piece of advice that you would give them?
It's going to sound boring, but it goes back to that foundation.
Okay.
Get enough sleep, eat good food,
Yeah.
manage that stress. Those things might not be sexy,
Yeah.
but they are the non-negotiable.
Awesome. And for everyone listening, remember, becoming bulletproof, it's a journey, not a destination. So keep training smart, recover even harder, and we'll see you next time for another deep dive.
Hello there, it's me again. I hope you enjoyed this episode, and I'd love to have some feedback. So if you're listening on YouTube, please like and subscribe and drop a comment. And if you're on another platform, subscribe now for future episodes packed with actionable insights. In each episode, we'll be breaking down the key concepts from my book, making it easier for you to improve your game step by step. So don't miss out, subscribe today, and as always, may the spin be with you.